Uber Eats messed up. They let DoorDash grow in markets unabated. Uber Eats was 3x the size of Dash in 2018. Since then, Dash has inverted this market share and is worth more than all of Uber, including Eats and Rides. DoorDash was executing, and they didn't have to deal with a CEO and all the executive team turning over and people figure, what should I do, focus on, right? Like chaos. Why is DoorDash, or why did DoorDash for a brief period of time surpass Uber's market cap? There's a lot of conjecture out there. We've actually talked about in the past on the show why DoorDash has been so successful. It's not new news that DoorDash has more market share than Uber Eats. We covered that when we did a deep dive on DoorDash leading up to their IPO. Some tweets from Emil Michael, who has been cataloging this. He was the former chief business officer at Uber, was, and probably still is very close to Travis Kalanick, really one of the marquee co-founders, and obviously was the CEO for the majority of Uber's tenure. He actually initially joined it as kind of an early investor, then became co-founder, put in a bunch of money, then kind of took over as CEO if we go in the way back time machine. Emil Michael has not let go of the fact that, the board, with, heavy involvement from some of Uber's closest and longest VC investors, Benchmark really being, and Bill Gurley really being, one of the biggest advocates for Uber over the years, and then was one of the biggest proponents of ejecting Travis and some of the close top tier executives like Emil Michael out of Uber. So Emil is clearly tracking, hey, since I have not been involved in this company, how has it been going? Here is a recent tweet from Emil. He says, never would we have ever thought this nightmare possible. Uber Eats was 3x the size of Dash in 2018. Since then, Dash has inverted this market share and is worth more than all of Uber, including Eats and Rides. Globally, the Yahooification of Uber is sad to watch. A little bit of bias, but also a little bit of truth, right? He's kind of saying, hey, what's going on? How would you let something like this happen, Dara and team? I've been very positive on Uber's platform conglomerate status, right? On them having both Rides and Eats, on them choosing to really just be number one or number two in a given market and to exit. If they weren't in that number one and number two position, or if they're in a number three, how can they kind of consolidate with the number two, for example, or use M&A as a vehicle to accelerate ultimately their ability to get to profitability, but to kind of recognize here are the markets we're strongest in, and let's focus on those and defocus from the ones where we have an uphill battle to climb. Emil has a few tweets, which I'm going to talk about, which give his explanation for why you've seen the Yahooification of Uber. And so what are the actual market share stats of meal delivery in the US? DoorDash, according to Second Measure, has 57% of the US meal delivery market, and Uber Eats 26%. Wow. Less than half of DoorDash. So let's go to the tape. Let's go to Second Measure. Here is Second Measure's monthly sales analysis. Bloomberg just acquired this company somewhat recently. Second Measure really looking at kind of credit card transaction data to narrow in where the money is flowing. You can see here this massive spike being attributed to COVID in obviously, March of 2020. From 2018 numbers to pre-COVID hitting, the total size of meal delivery 2.5x. That's what this chart is showing us. To a peak now of really end of 2020 was then over 6x, right? So from the period from 2018 to early 2020, you had about a 2.5x increase in the overall size of the market. And then that went from 2.5x to over 6x, right? So a massive, massive, massive increase because of COVID and people not going out and wanting food delivered to their home. So in that period of time, Emil's claim is that back in 2018, if you're looking at the chart, DoorDash is in orange, Uber Eats is in red. What did his tweet say? That they had 3x the size of Dash in 2018. So if I'm looking at this chart, and I look at the red and I look at the orange, doesn't really look like 3x, right? If anything, Grubhub looks 3x, either Uber Eats or DoorDash. DoorDash and Uber Eats actually look somewhat even back in 2018. So let's just say that they are even. And if Emil's point is that, Uber should have beat DoorDash, how did DoorDash beat Uber Eats? He thinks that Uber Eats was in a much larger point of dominance. He was there. Maybe he has some better data than Second Measure. I don't know. Maybe he's referencing global sales of Uber Eats. That would make more sense. Whereas this is obviously looking at US sales. So globally, Uber Eats absolutely, is in a number of countries. And so that would make more sense. But in the US, I would actually say it's not 3x. Let's just say it's an even start. But still, how did DoorDash pull this off? We're going to answer that question. The second thing is that Uber Eats does have a huge global presence. The reporting is also a little bit off, right? The Financial Times is saying, well, Uber Eats has just 26%. Okay, that's 26% of the US market. But the total Uber Eats GMV relative to the total DoorDash GMV, DoorDash is really just in North America, Uber Eats is in multiple countries, is also a much smaller gap. What we've talked about before on the show is that DoorDash strategically expanded aggressively to the suburban environments, right? If you think about food delivery, meal delivery marketplaces in the earlier days, they were really concentrated where in urban environments where you had high density of restaurants and consumers, right? You could route deliveries quickly because they're all close to each other. You had a lot of demand, you had a lot of supply, a lot of fragmentation, right? Kind of all the recipe that you would want for scaling any kind of marketplace business, right? Then kind of curious then what DoorDash really did, which was very impressive, was that they went and expanded aggressively to the suburbs. And if you look at this chart, so 2017 DoorDash revenue was $110 million. Boom, 2018, $550 million, right? 5x, 1 year. Then 2019, $850 million. And then 2020, $2.9 billion, right? How did they make those leaps and gains? And the thing that I really zero in on is this number, the number of restaurants. So you look at this, right? From 2017, 59,000 to 2018, 100,000 to 2019, 258,000. And then, from 2019, 258 to 2021, 390, right? This big leap here from 2017 to 2019, they basically 5x the number of restaurants. And the way I think you do that, it takes years of work preceding the big leap, right? For the big leap to happen. So the things that were in the making to me goes back to this aspect of them saying, we could fight in urban, or we could really focus aggressively on focusing on the suburban markets, your sub 10 top 10 markets, right? Okay, yeah, I got Uber Eats and I got Grubhub and Postmates and Caviar, right? And probably a couple others that I'm forgetting, all competing aggressively in urban. What about all the markets that aren't in the top 10 cities? What about all the suburban markets? That's where DoorDash really aggressively focused. That to me was something that they're working on for years, leading up to these massive market share leaps that you start to see. 2018 going into 2019 was a huge year for them. That's my theory on it. There's obviously other things that they did just with product innovation and this and that. But to me, the big the big leap, right? Which then you can, once you hit that critical mass, now you're out in front, right? Here's the critical year. 2019, they had parity, right? 2019, they leaped this was the big leap year, was 2019. And then DoorDash just continued. And then what DoorDash said is, okay, now we've surrounded them. It's kind of like what Facebook did. If there is a competitive social network at, say, one school, what Facebook would do is they wouldn't go directly into that school. What they would do is they would find all the schools neighboring that school, go spread to those schools where the competitor wasn't already in those schools. Facebook would go into the neighboring adjacent schools, get all those social networks humming, and then they would go and attack the school that their competitor had beat them to, right? It's kind of, I think it might have even been talked about in the Facebook movie, this kind of surround and then attack strategy, right? DoorDash going into the suburbs, getting traction, getting volume, raising capital, building demand and audience and network on both supply and demand, and then saying, okay, now we're ready to go take the fight into the urban environment, take the fight to Uber Eats and the Caviars and the Postmates and the Grubhubs of the world and go aggressively into urban. And that's what they've done more so in the past couple of years, right? So that's my take on it. Let's see what Emil's take on it is. Fourth annual reminder of Uber missing this goal. Sadly, Uber is worth about the same as Lyft and Dash combined. This is in early August, even though they both serve just the US and Canada and Uber is global. He's replying to a tweet from Benchmark in 2017, 2 years prior, August 2017. We're long on Uber. Benchmark's comparative valuation analysis shows Uber could comfortably be worth over $100 billion in just 2 years. You saw the stock price. Uber is still at not 100, is still sub $100 billion valuation 4+ years later. Emil goes, the main explanations I have are A, massive value destruction caused by current management losing Uber Eats' dramatic lead over DoorDash that was left to them in 2018. He says it's 3x. Other data shows it's maybe 1x. In just the US, it's bigger globally. Also, Uber Eats retreat from India and the Middle East. So there you go. Shrinking the global volumes. I guess he's just saying this was mismanagement on behalf of current management. For example, missing the strategic misstep that DoorDash went suburban and Uber Eats missed that, right? They didn't react. They should have taken it and been toe-to-toe with DoorDash in those markets. It would have been much more difficult for DoorDash to get to scale in those markets if Uber Eats was competing at the same veracity. Number of shots that he takes, but I think the first point is the one that I'm really talking about most, which is massive value destruction caused by current management losing Uber Eats' dramatic lead over DoorDash that was left to them in 2018. He says it's massive. I says it's strong. But the point is this. Uber Eats messed up. They did mess up. They let DoorDash grow in markets unabated. And we're not really pushing as aggressively. And probably some of that mix up and, missing that was from the management shakeup, right? So if we look at Emil's profile, Emil was their chief business officer, September 2013 through June 2017. In August 2017, Dara joined as CEO of Uber. So all of this was starting, the suburban move. This is all when this stuff was happening, was in 2017, was when DoorDash was going to rural, was going to suburbia. They didn't start doing this in 2018. 59,000 restaurants, 2017. 100,000 restaurants, 2018. Right? You don't just snap your fingers and say, oh, well, in a year, we're just going to add, go from 100 to 258. These are things you need people, you need systems, you need tech, you need process, right? There's a lot of work that goes into onboarding this number of restaurants at that level of scale in that such fast period of time. It's crazy. They were going into suburbia in 2017. Dara was coming in. Dara was figuring out what the hell to do, hiring people, bringing on management, exiting other markets. And they missed it. They missed it. That's on Dara. That's also a direct byproduct of absolutely ejecting Travis and his team out of Uber. The data is there. This is when this stuff was happening. 2017. This was the strategic stuff that was going into place and DoorDash was executing, and they didn't have to deal with the CEO and all the executive team being ejected and then the whole teams turning over and people figure, what should I do? Focus on, right? Like chaos. Now, the sad thing is that they haven't really been able to recover from it. They've kind of just maintained. And I think that also speaks to how well or really lack thereof Uber leadership has been able to react to DoorDash kicking their butt. Hi, I'm Alex. Thanks for watching the show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, but even better, make sure to follow us on Odyssey, follow us on Rumble, and text us 203-646-5159. Text the word Monopoly. You'll be subscribed. You'll get updates about when we're going live, our latest videos, and we'll send you even a little goodie bag. And in the event that we all get banned from big tech, we'll still be connected.